This whole court history is just a wonderful, masterful work of prose. Some speak about all of this unit as being authored by the J source. You need to know that source theory has undergone so many permutations. There really isn't any standard view, but I think the idea that the sources J, E, P, and D extend beyond the Pentateuch is now generally no longer accepted. So you will sometimes see people talking about the J source as going all the way through the end of 2 Kings and being, in fact, J is the author of the court history. But for the most part, I think most people think of the source theory as applying to the Pentateuch, and beyond that we talk about the Deuteronomistic historian redacting older, earlier sources. I'll talk a little bit more about some of those sources as we move through the later books, the books of the former prophets. The court history has an array of very richly drawn characters. They act out all sorts of scenes of power and lust and courage and struggle. There's crime, there's tender love. It's a very realistic sort of psychological drama. It's also striking for its uncompromising honesty. We don't see anything like that really in the work of any contemporary historian. David is depicted in very, very human terms. The flattery and the whitewashing that you find in other ancient Near Eastern dynastic histories is lacking here. The flattery and whitewashing that we get, for example, in Chronicles. Right? The books of Chronicles are really just a retelling of the material here in the former prophets. And they clean up the picture of David. There's no mention of Bathsheba in there. So you do have that kind of whitewashing as part of the historiography of the book of Chronicles, but it's lacking here. All of the flaws, all of the weaknesses of David, a national hero, they're all laid bare. Implicitly, perhaps, that is a critique of kingship. It's perhaps a critique of the claim of kings to rule by divine right. The author here seems to be stressing that David, and as we shall see, Solomon, he's quite human, Solomon's quite human, they are not at all divine, they're subject to the errors and flaws that characterize all humans. As we move out of Samuel now and into 1st and 2nd Kings, we see that these books, Kings, contain the history of Israel from the death of King David until the fall of Judah in 587, 586, and the exile to Babylonia. These books also appear to be based on older sources. Some of them are explicitly identified. They will refer sometimes to these works, which evidently were subsequently lost, but they'll refer to the book of the Acts of Solomon, or the book of the Annals of the Kings of Israel, or the book of the Annals of the Kings of Judah. Annals and chronicles were regularly maintained in royal courts throughout the ancient Near East. There's no reason to think that this wasn't also done in a royal setting in Israel. These annals generally listed events, important events in the reign of a given king. They tended not to have much narrative to them, and the beginning of the first 16 chapters of 1 Kings has that kind of feel. Not a lot of narrative and really reportage of events. Beginning in 1 Kings 17 through 22, the first 9 chapters of 2 Kings, there's a departure from that annal style, annal genre, the reporting of events in the reign of a king, and you have more developed narratives in those sources. And these narratives generally feature prophets. So it's going to lead very nicely into our study of prophets.